Hello, everybody, and welcome to Some Idiot Said, where I look at someone who's in the wrong and point out to you why they're in the wrong. Yes, I know that getting into politics is a risky gamble for the success of my career and my sanity, but some things need to be said. To start this game of Russian roulette, I'm a cishet Canadian man who is of a middle class background, is atheist, and I'm of mixed Scottish, Welsh, and Métis heritage. I'm liberal, believe in preserving the environment, and I am pro human rights. Believe that all human beings deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, at least until they tread upon the rights of others. I believe in democratic socialism, and I try to respect everyone, but my respect can only go so far. And I have a burn book that will make Regina George proud, jealous, or both. Anyways, let's start on this Some Idiot Said, where we talk about transphobia. Trigger warning. Transphobia, misogyny, online harassment, slurs, profanity, misgendering, sexual harassment / rape. The person we'll talk about first is a YouTuber whose name is known as trans women or sexist men, and right from their username, which is undeniably hate speech, you could tell that they are a raging transphobe. I first came upon this completely unfunny clown on the video, which you could see in a link in the description below, which was made by Shark 300 and is about the vigil, quote unquote, vigil for the lost, which is basically a bunch of turfs whining about trans people while feeding a personal narrative of victimhood. If you don't know what a turf is, it's basically someone who uses feminism as an excuse to be transphobic, because turfs are willing to collaborate with a right to harass trans people, love body shaming trans people, and reinforce sex stereotypes. I cannot consider them feminists, so I call them farts. Feminism appropriating reactionary transphobes. For the asshole in question, here are their comments. They're the one with the icon blurred out who is using baby talk and even crying like a baby would call out, prove that they're just a toddling, bullying bigot trying to impose their own agenda. Okay, here are the screenshots. Man, that person really sucks. See? Literal garbage. With these awful arguments, you can tell that just like every other transphobe, they believe everything they say is true and use that to justify misgendering trans people, which can kill them. I am not being melodramatic. Misgendering can cause suicide. They use feminism to justify transphobia, treating the trans community like a cult that pretends to be the gender they identify as, rather than the reality of them knowing that their gender identity is what they genuinely see themselves as. And they show the difference between trans misogyny, trans misandry. Trans misogyny or transphobia directed at trans women portrays trans women as misogynistic men who are at best act out what they think women act like, and at worst pose as women to invade women's spaces. This conveniently ignores the fact that there's butch trans women out there, that trans women have fought alongside cis women in the campaign of feminism for a long time, still do, and will continue to do so, and the fact that if a male predator wanted to invade women's spaces, he wouldn't go through all the steps of gender reassignment, it will just barge in there. Meanwhile, trans misandry or transphobia directed at trans men is not as visceral as trans misogyny, but is condescending and infantilizing towards trans men, treating them as confused little girls who transitioned in order to escape the patriarchy, not because they know that they are men in their hearts. Also, I noticed the hashtag trans souls or brittle souls, which, while led nowhere, seems to imply that trans people are mentally unstable, which is because only true because they're like the most persecuted group in the world. I checked their account and reported them after disliking every comment they made and report that, and now I report each of their hateful videos which have just a black screen for a thumbnail. And Jesus Christ, those video titles are openly hateful, like such as what kind of man steals a gold medal from a woman and proof that all trans women are sexist men. This bigot doesn't accept reality. It has devoted their entire online presence and possibly their entire life to their crusade against a group of people that's almost certainly far less privileged than they are. No trans woman has ever won a sport where she competed against cis women, so trans women having a biological, physical advantage over cis women is a myth. In fact, I say that transphobic rhetoric is completely devoid of actual credibility. It is rich in dog whistles meant to indoctrinate those who don't know any better. If you want to be able to spot transphobe, here's a list compiled from Queer Vegan of common transphobic dog whistles. Okay, it will be in the description below. But I'll tell you that the dog whistles are used to invalidate the identity of trans people. I express a want for a few of them to exist in the world, make them seem delusional, like a threat to women and children, portray transition as inherently destructive, as a trans community as a dangerous cult that's mutilating and indoctrinating children. And yes, farts have produced a model for transphobia that transphobic rightists have incorporated into their rhetoric. That is another proof of a horseshoe theory being in play, with a striking amount of similarities between the alt-right and the intolerant left, cause them to collaborate on a shared issue due to having similar positions on it. One example of a fart you are all familiar with is J.K. Rowling, who I used to idolize, but I now hate. Her comment of transphobic came out of a blue and was especially shocking of a betrayal because Hogwarts was seen by many transphobes as like a safe space where they could be free to be who they are without having to hide anything. And if we were to realistically enforce a law designed to keep trans women out of women's bathrooms, how would we be able to enforce such a pointless and discriminatory law? Will we have someone look at each person who enters the bathroom, which can put butch cis women and effeminate cis men at risk of being forced to use the wrong bathroom? Will we have someone inspect the genitals of every person who wants to use a public bathroom, destroying any privacy that they once gave? Either way, I can only see that these laws will, in designed to screw over trans people, will inevitably harm cis people, and they'll result in people defecating and urinating on the streets like disgusting, uncivilized animals. Another thing to watch out for is any mentions of being concerned about rapid onset gender dysphoria, because that's a pretty good red flag for I am a TERF. While many have nicknamed Rowling's transphobic essay, which I read to bite the bullet so you don't have to, and that's somehow gotten award the TERF Manifesto. The actual TERF Manifesto was Janice Raymond's 1994 book, The Transsexual Empire, The Making of a She-Male, which compares trans women existing to rape, which is not only an insult to every survivor of rape, by comparing their traumas to one fart's visceral reaction to a group of people she hates. And it also shows how privileged she is, and it outlined the quote-unquote final solution to the quote-unquote trans question, to quote-unquote mandate them out of existence. How? By passing legislation that will make it not impossible, but discouragingly difficult for trans people to medically transition. What Raymond says she wants is genocide, and that's the endgame of the fart movement. They want to eradicate the trans community, seeing them as freaks, while using feminism and sneaky wording to seem like reasonable, rational people. Transphobes are hateful, irrational wolves in insane, concerned sheep's clothing. For another piece of transphobic writing you should not touch, for your brain cells' sake, there's Abigail Shrier's 2020 read, The Irreversible Damage, the Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters, which treats the trans community as a cult whose MO is to tear families apart, to isolate the children before mutilating them and leaving them with a lifetime of regret. It shows that Schreier sees children as objects that are beholden to their parents' will, and that to her being trans is a choice. By denying trans people their bodily autonomy, you are going against a core principle of feminism that the woman's body is her own and nobody but her gets to choose what she does or doesn't do with it. And of course, it still applies if a pronouns him/his or they/there are the preferred pronouns of a person. An individual's body is their castle and they get to rule it, and anybody else who tries to do so is an invader. By mocking and ridiculing how they look, transphobes are body shaming, which is one of the things that feminism is utterly incompatible with. And as a feminist, I know that body shaming is toxic, shameful behavior meant to subjugate and demoralize. By treating trans women as predators wearing the sex equivalent of blackface and trans men as confused little girls who are trying to escape misogyny by swapping their pronouns, farts are reinforcing harmful gender stereotypes and expectations of men being narcissistic, malicious beasts and women being delicate, submissive pets. And by attacking the trans community, so-called gender-critical feminists, they call themselves that because they're critical of gender being a thing, are benefiting the patriarchy, which has only survived as long as it has off of infighting. The patriarchy can be put to rest if, and only if, every person of every identity works together against it, because the patriarchy helps nobody and harms everybody, making it the enemy of all humanity. Men suffer due to the patriarchy, but not as obviously as women do. So long story short, all transphobia does is perpetuate the patriarchy, and that's all for my first Some Idiot Said. Tyson out.